אנחנו מתחילים את המושב הראשון שלנו, כידוע, קיימות, סביבה וכלכלה הולכות ביחד. כותרת המושב, קיימות עירונית וכלכלת שיתוף, הילכו שניים יחדיו. המרצה הראשון שלנו הוא אורח מחול. ניל גורנפלו נחשב לאחד הפעילים החדשניים והבולטים בעולם שמניעים כלכלת שיתוף עירונית. הוא בין המייסדים של Shareable, זירה מקוונת לפעילי כלכלת שיתוף, והוא מייעץ בנושא לרשויות מקומיות, ביניהן ערים זניחות כמו סאול, סן פרנסיסקו ואמסטרדם. בסוף השבוע האחרון התפרסם רעיון מאוד מעניין איתו במוסף כלכליסט. העיתון הנייר, אתם כבר יודעים מה עשו איתו, אבל אפשר, הוא נמצא באתר כמובן, אפשר ומומלץ לקרוא אותו. אני רוצה להקריא לכם את פסקת הפתיחה של הכתבה מכלכליסט ביום שישי. בבוקר שבת שטוף שמש בבריסל, במהלך ריצת בוקר, ניל גורנפלו חווה הערה. עבדתי אז כאסטרטג גלובלי, הוא מספר, של DHL. בסן פרנסיסקו נסעתי בכל העולם ופחות או יותר גרתי במלונות. באותו בוקר מסלול הריצה שלי עבר בפארק בבריסל, וכשעליתי לגבעה הראשונה במסלול קרה משהו לא צפוי. התחלתי לבכות. הבנתי שאני לא עושה את הדבר הנכון בחיים ולא ממצה את הפוטנציאל שלי. את המשך הריצה גורנפלו הקדיש לסקירה של חייו. הבנתי שאני עובר את החיים לבדי, הופעת סולו. למרות שעל הנייר ראיתי הצלחה, הרגשתי בודד וחסר כוח. בו בזמן הבנתי גם שהרבה מאוד אחרים מרגישים כמוני, או שמצבם אף גרוע יותר. זה נגע בי באופן עמוק, וידעתי שאני זקוק לשינוי מיידי. באותו רגע, בוכה במגרש חנייה, נשבעתי לעשות כל מה שאני יכול כדי ליצור חיים עם מטרה, חברויות, קהילה שקל למצוא באהבה ולקיים קשר. רצתי בחזרה לחדר במלון, שלחתי מכתב התפטרות ותפסתי את הטיסה הראשונה לסן פרנסיסקו. זה היה סוף הקריירה התאגידית שלי ב-DHL. תודו שאחרי הדברים האלה, מאוד מעניין לשמוע מה יש לו לספר לנו, תחת הכותרת Why the future of cities is sharing. מיסטר גורנפלו, please.
Shalom, Boker Tov, Bat Yama. Thank you to the Institute, to the Bat Yam College, and the mayor for having me here. I'm very honored. And also for that lovely introduction, and you just saved about 5 minutes on my speech, so thank you. And you have some idea now why I'm here in front of you, and to put a finer point on it, I'm really here to recruit you to a movement. I would like nothing more for all of you to go back to your to your cities, to your communities, and start a sharing program for your city or a sharing project for your community. And what I want to do to start out is just to give you a little bit of background. What happened after that moment in Brussels where I decided to change my career? I came back home to San Francisco, and I co-founded a nonprofit, Shareable, and our mission is to empower everyone to share for a more joyous, resilient, and equitable world. And we have the most visited blog about sharing, dedicated to sharing in the world at shareable.net. It's a great resource, and we also do community organizing and convening. And one of our first events, Share San Francisco, in 2011, brought the idea of sharing economy and cities together for the first time. And we invited San Francisco city officials to the event. We educated them about the importance of sharing in cities and about the sharing economy and follow-up meetings. In 2012, we helped the city launch their sharing economy working group. We did a big event, a big launch event with the mayor and city council people, and the event was held at SPUR. It's an urban policy research center. It's much like the JIIS, and it was record attendance, the most attendance for that kickoff event for the Sharing Economy Working Group of any event they've ever done in their history, and it got an incredible amount of media attention. Later in 2012, partly inspired by San Francisco, Seoul launched its Sharing City Seoul project. And that project, it's a comprehensive regulatory and programmatic package to catalyze more sharing in Seoul, spearheaded by the mayor. Since then, Seoul has become the guiding light of the Sharing Cities movement, inspiring other cities to start Sharing Cities program, including London, Milan, and Amsterdam. And we also published the first ever sharing economy policy guide for cities. And this has been downloaded about 40,000 times from city governments and academics and from cities all over the world. Well, from this experience, it was clear, it was clear that sharing cities was an idea whose time had come. In 2007, more than half of the world's population lived in cities, and for the first time ever. So, and in 2008, a year later, we also became the first time when more than half the population, the world's population, used a mobile phone. And also a new sharing economy emerged around this time, around 2008, and that was enthusiastically welcomed by millennials who valued access over ownership. This coincided with a global economic crisis and also a rise in awareness of the dangers of global warming. So in a few short years, we became a hyper-connected urban species with an urgent need to share and the ability to share like never before. So the Sharing Cities movement arose in this kind of perfect storm for sharing. And I believe Sharing Cities is one of our best hopes to turn a kind of global crisis, a global interconnected systemic crisis, to turn it into a kind of renaissance. We have an opportunity, a way out to a better life, as Tammy talked about. And so with the rest of my presentation, after giving you a little bit of background of how I went from that moment of Satori in Brussels to being part of starting a movement, what I'd like to do is dive into this concept a little bit more and outline a conceptual framework of sharing cities, talk about Sharing City Seoul in a little bit more depth, because it's an example you can learn from and build on to create your own program that makes sense for your community and for your city. And then I want to review some of my favorite sharing projects from around the world to give you some ideas and some inspiration. And then I want to wrap up, talk about the impact and why this is so important. Okay, so a sharing city, from my perspective, is a city as commons. But what is a commons? A commons is made up of three basic things. An asset to share, and that can be a fleet of cars, a public park, a business, a piece of software, or a website like Wikipedia. The second thing is it needs a group of users, people that will use and share the asset. And then the third, and I think most important thing, is that a commons is a social process, a democratic process that governs use of the asset. And commons are a kind of time-honored method for managing resources. It's ancient. It's been used in natural resource commons like grazing lands, fisheries and forests, and now it's becoming more prevalent in the urban context and being sort of reinvented there to some extent. And they're really, I think, perfect for today for a few important reasons. First, they promote social justice. They mix people together. They don't rely on the market and state, which some, increasingly seem to be failing to serve us. So they have a sort of independence. They're people-powered. You can get started on a commons-based solution immediately without permission with your neighbors. They also tend to preserve community identity, build social ties, and also boost resilience. And they are by nature something that is a method of preserving our community wealth and collective wealth for future generations. Unfortunately, as a society, particularly I think in America, the idea of the commons, it's just not on the radar, and we're invisible to commons, or at best, we take them for granted when they are, oh, thank you. When they are arguably the foundation of all wealth. So a sharing city supports commons-based solutions as much as market or government solutions, puts the commons, market, and government on equal footing, and also enable collaboration between them. They can partner. They're not at odds with one another. And they also have a chance, the potential to kind of break the spell of this dialectic between market and state has on us that was so destructive in the 20th century. And the sharing city says we need the market and government and commons. We need all of them, and we need them working together. And this gives us a chance at a kind of triadic sort of ecosystem that's stable, that's resilient. It's a kind of heterodox economy that we should be thinking about heading toward. A sharing city also favors services that transform social relations, that create enduring social ties rooted in civic values. A sharing city seeks transformations, not just transactions. And if, as a city, you invest in building a civic culture, this is an investment which can pay dividends for literally centuries. This is certainly true in cities like Bologna, which have a long history, a 1,000-year history of civic innovation. Okay, so that's a little on the concept of sharing cities, Shareable's take, my take on the sharing city. And let's put some meat on the bone with an example with what Seoul is doing. And Seoul is a city as commons in the making. Seoul's Sharing City program was launched in 2012 by Mayor Park. And Mayor Park's an interesting cat. He's a political independent. He's a human rights lawyer and a social entrepreneur by trade. So his Sharing City program is really a kind of extension of his career, a kind of authentic extension of his career. And it's situated, this program, in their innovation department, which is attached to the mayor's office. And it's a big team. It's like a 60-person innovation team, and the Sharing Cities program is a priority of this team. And the reason why they started the Sharing City Seoul program is, and this maybe sound familiar. Part of the motivation is that Seoul's rapid growth created some familiar problems like growing isolation, conflict, sort of modern economies, conflict with traditional values, overwork, and this has contributed to the highest suicide rate among modern economies. Another thing is that, it's a huge problem with air pollution and also waste. Seoul generates 9,000 tons of trash every day. And then also they're slowing economic growth, worsening equality, high household debt, and high housing costs. And this is, the changes in the economy are particularly hitting hard on young people. So Mayor Park sees sharing as a way to address all of these challenges, a kind of strategy that hits at the root of the challenges in Seoul and addresses many challenges at once. So it's a kind of holistic strategy. So there are four basic pillars to the program, to the Sharing City Seoul. The first is support for local sharing economy startups. So they've backed about 64 local sharing startups with funding and incubation support. There's Kozaza for homestays, Zipbob for meal sharing, Kipple for children's clothing. That's just 3 examples. The second thing they've done is they've opened up the government some, particularly resources like data and public space. So they've made over 1,300 data sets available to the public to use and add value to. So they have a big open data program, and they've also opened up 1,200 government buildings for public use, sparking over 200,000 new instances of use by citizens. The third thing they've done is, so they actively promote and use their media, the city's media, to promote sharing as a lifestyle. They support ShareHub, which is an online clearinghouse for Seoul's sharing services. This is run by Creative Commons Korea. And they're putting lending libraries in apartment towers across the city. And with the help of Seoul's 25 district governments, they plan to roll out a suite of sharing services district by district. And then the last thing that's really important to them is that they collaborate and learn from and share their knowledge and work with other cities. So they see themselves as a node in a network of sharing cities that collaborate together. So, I really think Seoul is a good starting place to develop a sharing strategy for your city. Not that you would copy it exactly, but there's some inspiration. There's some things that they've done right. First, they were proactive. They came up with their own framework and their own agenda early in the game before market forces forced them to act. So they brought a framework to the change that was coming their way. And then they went big. They didn't sort of half-ass it, right? They planned it well. They involved a large stakeholder group, the government, a market component, also a commons component with NGOs. And they supported local champions. So they sort of mapped what they have, and they built their program based on their strengths and the assets that they have to start with. I think that's a really important principle. And then the other thing, like which I mentioned, is they work with other cities. Seoul's example is far from perfect. There could be more bottom-up activity there. They could support platform co-ops. They're supporting sharing economy startups, but they could support sharing economy startups that share ownership and control of the platforms with users, which is a growing trend in the sharing economy. So, despite those, I think, fairly small issues, Seoul's program prefigures an important alternative to a centralized, proprietary, monopolistic sharing economy that Airbnb and Uber represent. Seoul's example represents the beginnings of a polycentric and open source, a commons-based sharing economy where cities work together on model policies and also sharing apps. Okay, so what I want to do now is illustrate this vision with a few examples. It's about 10 examples, but this is 10 from literally thousands on Shareable.net. So, in this, I want to suggest an important idea with this is that it's possible to run an entire city on sharing. That our observation at Shareable is that there are solutions in nearly every sector, and that the job is kind of to bring all the pieces that are out there of a sharing city together in your city. Okay, so some of the things that you can do or think about, or what might be inspiration. So you can do like Barcelona, which is putting a Fab Lab in every district of the city, and a Fab Lab is an open workshop and also represents a form of sustainable manufacturing where you download open source design files from the internet and then manufacture a product locally. It can also be a training center, a place to incubate businesses and new product ideas, have training and also for a place for citizens to come and repair household goods. You can do like Denver, which when Uber pressed for regulation, the city in forming in regulating an Uber, they also allowed more taxi medallions. They made more taxi medallions available to a group of taxi drivers that were forming a taxi co-op, so a worker-owned and operated taxi company. And so here you have kind of the best of both worlds, a taxi company that pays fair wages and that's stable and locally controlled, along with having the convenience of e-hailing like Uber offers. You could do like Adelaide in Australia and develop an open source goods redistribution service, a sort of local open source Craigslist to help citizens redistribute excess goods. And this is open source software, so you can get this on GitHub and start a share and save in your community or city. You can also do what a growing number of libraries, or take inspiration from what a growing number of libraries are doing. They're reinventing themselves in the digital age, and they increasingly see themselves as very local centers of community and economic development, where not only you can get information, but you can also create knowledge. They're putting maker spaces in, so you can also create goods, and then also they're sharing more than just books and having and starting library of things. So, where you can get music, loan out musical instruments, tools, household and household goods. So there's also Warp It. In the UK, there's a handful of city councils that are using this system to redistribute spare assets or idle assets like computer equipment, network equipment, and furniture to redistribute in the local government, between local governments, and also between different organizations. And they're saving millions of dollars doing this and saving tons from going to landfills. So it's really smart. You can do like the Smart Building Center in Seattle. They are a lending library. Part of what they do is they have a lending library. They offer door blowers, infrared cameras, airflow meters to help house builders build more green buildings. There's also Food Cloud, which redistributes, works with Tesco and redistributes tons of food, and has served almost 2 million meals from the excess food from about 150 supermarkets in Ireland. You've got the Senior Village movement. This comes out of Boston. It's a virtual retirement community. The seniors pool their assets to get the services they need so they can stay and age in place in the neighborhoods where they've lived for years and years. And then they create also a social support community. There's evergreen cooperatives, green cooperatives supported by the city. And then there's participatory budgeting. There's 1,500 cities in the world that are allowing their citizens to decide directly how a piece of the city budget is being spent, particularly in their neighborhood. And citizens work together in a deliberative process to come up with the projects that get funded. And it's a way of spreading the wealth of the city budget and getting more appropriate solutions into cities. So just to close out, I'll talk a little bit about the impact potential of sharing cities. So, and I'll start with car sharing and the impact of car sharing, because car sharing has been studied for about a decade. It's been around for a while. The best research in the sharing economy has been done on car sharing, and the stats are pretty clear. So, one shared car replaces up to 13 owned cars, and 50% of people who join to get access to a car who didn't have access to a car before. And so that shows something very special, the kind of magic of sharing, where you can radically reduce resource consumption while increasing access, right? A separate study showed that for every car you took off the road, you could keep up to $15,000 in the local economy. So I made a kind of back-of-the-envelope calculation in a meeting with Mayor Leah of San Francisco, that if he took half the cars off the road from 500,000 to 250,000, that he could keep an estimated $2 billion in the local economy annually. So it's a kind of economic stimulus package that's at our fingertips to make happen. So, you know, and imagine an economy that's organized like car sharing, an entire city that shares what the impact would be. And, you know, and that's what's possible. And that's what's the scale of the impact we need. And it's the approach we need. Sharing strikes at the root of the problem. It's a systemic solution. It addresses many challenges at once. And, you know, so sharing is very, very promising. I think it's any city talking about the future, sharing has to be at the center of the discussion. So it's very promising and central, but you can't expect it to produce the impacts you want, the positive impacts you want, unless you meet it head on with a framework that will get it to work for you. Thank you.